Kalimera to all of y'all listening this morning. Welcome to this special episode of the Allied Airpower podcast in Athens, Greece. I'm your host, callsign Houdini. Now, what isn't a call sign anyway? Let's get a bit philosophical here. When I first joined the U.S. Air Force and learned about what call signs were, I rolled my eyes, probably like all the Army people out there, or even like you probably are doing every time I say, howdy, I'm Houdini. But over time, after listening to pilot after pilot after pilot tell me the story of where they got their call signs, my curiosity taught me that there was always a personal narrative associated to the call sign. And as a storyteller myself, I became aware of how special call signs are in communicating the essential and the authentic person inside that pilot's helmet. Call signs tell stories, and that is at the core of strategic communications. In this week's episode, we talk about NATO's J10 Directorate, STRATCOM. We're here at the NATO Communicators Conference in Athens, Greece, the birthplace of not just democracy, but also the art of persuasion. Rhetoric, communication, dialogue. What a perfect place to host this seminal gathering of professional communicators from across the 32-member alliance. On the show today, we have Wing Commander Tim Barlow, former STRATCOM Director of NATO Allied Air Command, now working at SHAPE's J10 Directorate. He'll break down strategic communications for us and how we used it here at NATO Allied Air Command. And he's also going to provide us some really good tangible examples of how STRATCOM does its thing. All right, let's move on with the blah, 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 and let's get to the bam, bam, bam. Let's get into this episode. And welcome to the Allied Airpower podcast, and we're here in Athens, Greece, for the NATO Communicators Conference. And I have this personally, one of my favorite interviews, because I get to interview my former boss, my super cool former boss that I miss very much, Wing Commander Tim Barlow, our former A-10 Director at Allied Air Command. Sir, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jose. It's good to be here.
Well, the first question, very straightforward, is just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you come from, your service.
Okay, I am UK Royal Air Force. I have quite a mixed background that I now have almost 10 years in the kind of comms side of things, in terms of strategic communications, media, in building up that experience. As you said, I've just left Aircom and I'm now up at SHAPE. I'm working at the slightly higher strategic level headquarters, but still involved in strategic communications. I look after the planning and capability there. So very much looking forward to getting my teeth into that. I think it is. It's highly relevant that we are one here in Athens, the birthplace of democracy and free speech and philosophy and things like that. At a time where the world is very complex and we face a lot of threats, particularly in the information environment, about speech and how we talk about things. Very exciting times. A little scary in some respects, but scary good in that it's an opportunity.
Yes, sir. And you definitely hit the nail on the head. I guess moving to bigger, brighter things up at SHAPE, move to our loss at Aircom. But it is really cool that we're here in Athens, Greece. Like you said, the birthplace of democracy. Like we were talking about earlier, one of the places I want to go visit is Aristotle's Lyceum, where he taught rhetoric, the art of persuasion. And I've loved in the conversations this morning, in the opening remarks and everything, where they bring that up. I can't think of a better place to have the Strategic Communications Conference than Athens. But on that point, strategic communications, that's like a buzzword that's thrown out everywhere. It is. In your words, what is it?
I will give you a very simple answer, just to keep it kind of short and sweet. If you look at presence, posture, and profile, and then also look at kind of actions and words and deeds, it's incorporating all of that in how you communicate. I always use an example. I've used it many times. It's a simple one, and from a sporting environment is Usain Bolt. And his presence, his posture, his profile was one of the keys to his successes in winning 3 consecutive Olympics. at the 100 meters or 200 meters. Again, nice dull tie, but the Olympics here and that pieces you up, but I think I walked into that one, that was good.
Stratcom.
In our context, in NATO and what have you, it's putting all that together. It's multi-domain. It's also looking obviously at the political level of what's happening there, is how we do things, with our people and our equipment, and in what way you do it, and then how do we talk about that, and how do we use that to influence and change people's behaviors, change people's mindsets on various things. And that, in a nutshell, is kind of what I think Stratcom is.
Yeah, on that Usain Bolt metaphor or analogy, I might owe you some beers for helping me improve on my PT test, because every time I walked out of the aircon building, I would see, that profile, posture, presence. But thank you, sir. That is a great analogy, and really describing the role of Stratcom in NATO. How, tying into that question, why is that important for Allied Operation Stratcom?
It pulls everything together, and you go somewhere and you do something for a reason, and then you talk about it, and you talk about it to people who you want to talk about it to, and for example, your adversaries, for example, your own audiences, and you have different messages that you want to get across to them, and that all-encompassing piece of Stratcom is complex, particularly in today's information environment, but you've got to think about how you plan it and how you want to engage. And again, go back to the Usain Bolt analogy. He choreographed all of that. He was very clever with it, and used it to his effect, to have that effect on his adversaries, but also to win over his audiences and make people love it. And we have to do the same sort of thing. And for NATO, it's really important at the moment. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's a complex world, and we have to get our message out there to protect democracy and to protect the values that we hold dear to us that are being challenged at the moment. And if we don't do that and we don't talk about it properly, where will we be? I leave that question open.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, it is a very complex world where, there's one side that values this liberalism, this democracy, these values that we share as this 32-member alliance, and then there's the other part of the world that doesn't value those same values. And it's a very, that's the one thing I've learned in Stratcom at NATO, is it's a very audience-centric approach. How you've described, we got to be able to reach those audiences and have an effect on them. Yeah. What would you say, it's easier said than done. What would you say are the best means to do that? What channels, what ways? Do you have any case studies that you could share on successful Stratcom?
Yeah, and just coming back to your point earlier about the 32 nations and sharing those values, I think, going back to my own background, although from the UK, I've been very lucky to live in lots of different countries right since I was a kid. Probably spend more time outside the UK, and I've learned to communicate with different people from different backgrounds, different nationalities, different religions, and everyone's got some common things as a human being. And I think that's what we're trying to protect here. It's not just 32 nations. It goes wider than that. It goes out, obviously, to our partner nations. It also goes to our adversaries as well. They're human too. And then it's getting our message across to them. And I think an example of that worked really well for us, and Jose, you were involved in it as well, have played a massive part to the success that was. We hosted a group of Serbians at Air Command. And the Serbians were kind of politically minded. They were media, and there was a lot of kind of scare, I guess, about it, and fear about who these people were, what background they're coming from, and what they were going to do when they came to Aircom. What would their message be about what they saw? And we saw it as an opportunity to try and change perceptions. And you look back at the history of NATO Aircom, in particular with Serbia, and you go back to 1999, and it's still seen in their society as a very, very negative thing. And I think right from the very outset of the planning and the initial talks we had with them, we said, look, what do you want to get from it? What's your perception? We tried to understand things from their side. That's really, really important. And again, something I've learned from my life experiences, it's not about yourself as much as it's about everyone else. You need to understand that. You need to know where they're coming from, and a different perspective is just as valuable as your own. So we understood that. We spoke to them about it, and then we put together a program that played to that. And instead of it just being about kind of handshakes and meetings and talk, we got the USAFE band involved. So as soon as they got off the bus at Aircom, the band started playing. They played some Serbian cheese, and we, through your knowledge, had Colonel TQ, who was the bandmaster, and his wife was Serbian. So she was there, and she helped meet and greet and make the visitors feel really, really welcome. And then we progressed the program over the next couple of days, and I think everything that we did showed us in a really good light.
And it wasn't just anecdotal too, because there was data, right, to show, right?
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. You wanted to try and work out how we performed in that, and did some very quick analysis on it. And with a visit where you've got kind of key leaders and people like that involved, it's quite difficult to get that analysis, and it's quite difficult with analysis anyway in the media environment. And we did a quick questionnaire before and after, and very simply it was asking what their perception was of NATO and what they thought about NATO. Was it positive or negative? Almost as simple as that. At the outset, when they were on the bus coming from the airport, and then when they left, they got the same question, how does it make them feel, and what was their perception now of NATO? And it was 100% change. Every single one of that, and I think there were 19 people who came, every single one of them started off negative, ended up positive, which is a quick hot wash up of that event. Showed just how positive it was, and then they could go out into their sphere. What we thought was maybe a bit of a threat, them being from a political and media background, that they could go and influence and maybe send a negative message. They went and sold that positive message out in their area, and it spread. And that really is, I think, the key thesis. And that bit's hard to measure, somewhat out of our control. But I think we did everything we possibly could to make that as a successful trip as possible for them. And in terms of Stratcom, it kind of had everything, really. It had the social media involvement, it had your key leaders, it had us showing our presence and our equipment and our kind of posturing and what we do, what we're talking about in terms of our missions and how we operated.
Yeah, especially when you bring us a NATO aircraft, the AWACS, for a Stratcom
that was
activity. That was amazing,
Yeah. And we showed up the strength of the alliance. We took them onto the assault course where we train lots of people from across NATO. They come from their different nations. And they learn various different courses, but part of the assault course bit is to kind of break down the barriers and work together as a team. And that, I think, is the key to success. With NATO and with our Stratcom, we've got to work together as a team. We've got, you've seen from the conference here, there's some great minds, there's some great ideas. There's some great tech. There's all sorts of things you could bring to the party, but we need to enhance that. We need to work out how to do that quickly, and that's our strength.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, because so many of the things in that case study have been described here at the conference. I mean, I think the one thing that really sticks into my head is, meeting people where they're at. Understanding what's in it for the NATO publics, right? Why should they care? And that was one of the things you asked that delegation. Okay, what do you want to get out of it? Instead of talking just one way to them, we had a dialogue. We wanted to get to know them. We wanted to understand. And some of the speakers have talked about that. Many-to-many communications to one-to-one, right? And that's how you're reaching Dale. Well, sir, reminiscing on the past makes me sad. So, because I miss you. So we're going to move on to more happier questions. And the last question, because I know I'm holding you up from the last panel of the day.
Don't worry.
And that is, what does NATO mean to you?
It's a good question, and I guess I give you quite a potentially kind of deep-ish answer, and not emotional, but for me it means a lot. And I've had the privilege of working with people from different nations, and in particularly here in NATO, in my job, you have 32 nations. I didn't work with all 32 in my particular teams, but a massive spread, from down in the kind of southeast corner, Portuguese, Spanish, as far away as yourself from America, and then you've got really interesting cultures from Turkey, Bulgaria, everyone in together, and I love people. I love integrating with people and seeing things from their side and understanding them. And that to me is great. I love to be in that environment, and if we can use that is our strength to combat our adversaries. We have to understand each other. We have to find common agreements, and we're not always going to have common agreements. It's like a big family. Family have little arguments sometimes here and there, but you know what? They stay as one unit and they move together. And that's what we had to do in NATO, and that's what it means to me. It's really important. It's really special. It keeps our values of democracy that you seen here in Athens right on the doorstep, and that's what we need to work hard to protect.
Well said, sir. Yeah, and I think every panelist has said this. Collectively, we're stronger together. It's not just a buzzword. I mean,
yeah, that's what NATO's about. So let's just make it happen. That's the simple thing. You just got to put those actions, the words into actions.
For sure, sir. Words are weapons. I think someone said it this morning. Well, anyway, sir, thank you for your time, for being on the Allied Air Power podcast. We miss you. I miss you. But I'm glad we got to catch up here.
Glad to be on board. Thanks.
That wraps up this flight of the Allied Air Power podcast, where news-driven updates meet the authentic voices behind the mission to defend every inch of NATO territory. Today in Athens, we talked about talking, communication, relationship building, rhetoric, persuasion, speech, and most poignantly, democracy. In the preamble of the NATO treaty, it states that all parties are, quote, determined to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of their peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. Our adversaries are determined to sow division in our democracies, and STRATCOM is determined to prevent them from doing so. Our guest today, Wing Commander Barlow, showed us how Allied Air Command employs STRATCOM through profile, presence, and posture. There's just something powerful in seeing that NATO-branded AWACS up in the air. Now, if you found value in today's episode, share the show and leave a rating so others can navigate airspace and cyberspace. Explore deeper coverage anytime at ac.nato.int and send us your questions or topics you'd like us to tackle. Until our next sortie, stand ready in the air, secure in cyberspace, secure in the information environment, and steady on the path to the stars.